My name is Evelyn Carter, and 3 days ago my younger brother stood in my kitchen, looked me in the eyes, and told me I had 30 days to leave the house I had spent 7 years paying for. The house wasn't his. The mortgage wasn't his. The bills weren't his. But according to my family, none of that mattered, because he had a wife now, a baby on the way, and apparently that made his future more important than my entire life. The worst part? My mother nodded while he said it. My father wouldn't even look at me. I remember standing there with a coffee mug still in my hand, waiting for someone to laugh and admit it was some kind of terrible joke. Nobody did. Instead, my brother pulled a folded document from his jacket and slid it across the counter. Think about it logically, Evelyn, he said. You don't need all this space. I stared at him, then at the paper, then back at him. You're serious? Completely. My mother crossed her arms. We've discussed it as a family. As a family, those 4 words hit harder than anything else, because I wasn't included in that discussion. I never was. Not when they needed money. Not when they needed help. Not when they needed someone to solve a problem they created. But somehow they always remembered I was family when it was time to sacrifice something. I looked around my kitchen. The kitchen I renovated myself. The cabinets I installed with my own hands. The dining table I spent 3 months saving for. The walls I painted after working double shifts every weekend for almost a year. Every inch of that room existed because of me. Yet my family stood there acting like I was a temporary guest, like I should be grateful they were giving me 30 days. I finally picked up the document. Then I laughed. Not because anything was funny, because it was the only thing stopping me from crying. My brother frowned. What? I turned the paper around and tapped the signature line. Interesting. My mother's expression changed slightly. What is? I looked directly at her. You really should have read everything before bringing this to me. The room went quiet. For the first time all evening, I saw uncertainty appear on their faces. Just a flicker. But it was there. My father finally looked up. What are you talking about? I folded the document carefully, very carefully. Then I placed it back on the counter. Nothing. My brother's jaw tightened. Evelyn, I smiled. A calm smile. The kind that makes people nervous. You said I have 30 days. That's right. I nodded. Okay. His confidence returned instantly. Good. I'm glad you're being reasonable. Reasonable. That word almost made me laugh again. Because what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 30 days was going to change every single one of our lives. And not in the way they expected. You see, my family believed they knew everything about me. They believed I was predictable, reliable, convenient, the daughter who fixed problems, the sister who paid bills, the person who always stepped in when everyone else failed. What they never realized was that I had spent years quietly keeping records. Every transfer, every loan, every promise, every favor, every signature. I never imagined I'd need any of it until that night. The night my own family decided I was disposable. And the moment they walked out of my house, I opened a locked drawer in my office. Inside was a folder, a very thick folder. I stared at it for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and made a call. The woman answered on the second ring. Hello? I took a slow breath. It's me. Pues. Then her voice softened. Evelyn? Is everything okay? I looked toward the front door where my family had just left. No. I opened the folder, but I think it's finally time. Time for what? I turned to the very first page, the page that changed everything. And for the first time in 7 years, I told someone the truth. My family has been lying. Another pause. Then, how bad is it? I looked down at the documents, the numbers, the signatures, the dates, and all the secrets they thought would never come out. Then I answered honestly. Worse than you can imagine. The woman on the other end of the line was Laura Bennett, my attorney. Technically, she had been my attorney for nearly 5 years. In reality, she had become something closer to a witness to every strange financial decision my family had ever convinced me to make. Every loan, every guarantee, every emergency, every promise that began with, "We'll pay you back," and every promise that somehow disappeared afterward. Laura was quiet for several seconds. Then she asked the question she always asked. Do you want to tell me everything? I looked around the empty kitchen. The silence felt different now. Heavy, permanent, like a door had finally closed. Yes. Everything? I closed my eyes. Everything. I heard papers moving on her desk. Okay, start from the beginning. The beginning. That was the problem. The beginning wasn't one moment. It was thousands of tiny moments spread across years, small sacrifices, small compromises, Small betrayals, the kind that don't feel dangerous until one day you realize they've become your entire life. So I started with the truth nobody outside my family knew, including my brother, including my parents, including the woman my brother had married, because some lies survive only when everyone agrees not to look too closely. And my family had spent years making sure nobody looked, including me. 7 years earlier, I was 31, working 60-hour weeks, managing operations for a logistics company in Charleston. The pay was good, the hours were terrible, but after a decade of struggling, I was finally getting ahead. For the first time in my life, I had savings, not much, but enough to dream, enough to imagine a future that belonged to me. Then my father called. I remember the exact moment. It was a Tuesday, almost midnight. I had just gotten home from work. My phone rang. Dad? His voice sounded strange, tired, defeated. Evelyn. I immediately sat up straighter. What happened? There was a long silence. Then he said words that would change everything. We might lose the house. The house wasn't just a house. It had belonged to my grandparents. Every holiday, every birthday, every family photograph, everything happened there. My parents had lived in it for almost 30 years. Losing it would have devastated them. So naturally I asked the question, how much? Another silence. Then the number. I remember staring at the wall afterward, because it wasn't a small number. It wasn't even a large number. It was a terrifying number. Enough money to destroy my savings completely. Enough money to set my own future back years. Dad, I know. What happened? He explained. Medical bills, missed payments, debt, bad timing, unexpected expenses. The explanation sounded believable, at least at the time. And because I loved him, I never looked deeper. That was my first mistake. Not helping, trusting. Those are different things. People often confuse them. I certainly did. 3 days later, I emptied nearly everything I had saved. Every dollar I could access. Every investment I could liquidate. Every plan I had for myself. Gone. Just like that. I told myself it was temporary. Family helps family. That's what good daughters do. That's what I believed. My parents cried. My mother hugged me. My father promised repayment. Over and over. We'll make this right. I believed that too. At the time, 6 months later, another emergency appeared. This time, it involved my younger brother, Daniel. Daniel was 27, charming, funny, popular, the kind of person who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 20 new friends. People loved him, including me. Back then, before I understood the difference between being loved and being useful, Daniel had started a business. Or at least, that was the official story. The business wasn't doing well. Investors wanted out. Debt was growing. According to my parents, helping him was helping the whole family. I said no, the first time, then the second time, then the third. By the 10th conversation, I was exhausted. By the 20th, I was guilty. By the 30th, I gave in. That became a pattern, not because they convinced me, because they wore me down. There's a difference. One is persuasion. The other is pressure. And my family had mastered pressure. Over the next several years, I became the solution to every crisis. A car broke down. Call Evelyn. A loan payment was late. Call Evelyn. Credit card debt. Medical expense. Business problem. Tax issue. Emergency repair. Call Evelyn. Always Evelyn. Never Daniel. Never anyone else. Eventually, something strange happened. The requests stopped sounding like requests. They started sounding like obligations. As though helping was no longer generous. It was expected. Required. Normal. If I hesitated, I was selfish. If I questioned anything, I was difficult. If I said no, I wasn't being supportive. The rules changed without anyone announcing them, and because the changes happened slowly, I didn't notice. Not at first. Then came the house. The house where everything happened. The house my brother now wanted me to leave. 5 years earlier, it had been listed for sale. Abandoned. Falling apart. Most buyers weren't interested. The foundation needed work. The plumbing needed work. The roof needed work. Everything needed work. I loved it immediately. Not because it made sense, because it felt like mine. For the first time, I wanted something for myself. Just myself. No parents, no brother, no family obligation. Just me. I bought it. The process took months. The repairs took years. Every paycheck went into that property. Every weekend. Every vacation. Every holiday. While friends traveled, I painted walls. While coworkers relaxed, I installed flooring. While everyone else built lives, I I rebuilt a house. One room at a time. One paycheck at a time. One sacrifice at a time. 7 years. 7 years of work. 7 years of debt. 7 years of believing I was building a future. And now my brother wanted it. Not part of it. Not shared ownership. The entire thing. The first time Daniel mentioned moving in was almost a year earlier. At the time it sounded harmless, casual. We were having dinner at my parents' house. His wife, Madison, was pregnant with their first child. Everyone was celebrating. Then Daniel looked around the table. You know, he said, that house of yours would be perfect for a family. I laughed. Good thing I'm a family. No, you know what I mean. The table went quiet, not uncomfortable, just observant. Everyone suddenly seemed very interested in my answer. I remember that clearly now, because looking back I realized the conversation wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. They had already discussed it. I was the only person hearing it for the first time. Daniel, I said carefully, I live there. He smiled. Yeah, but eventually you'll probably want something smaller. Something smaller. I was 38 years old, not 88, but nobody corrected him. Nobody laughed. Nobody said the idea was ridiculous. Instead, my mother nodded thoughtfully, as though they were discussing future furniture arrangements. Not my life. My life. That's when the pattern finally became visible, like an image slowly emerging through fog. Every favor, every loan, every sacrifice, every expectation, all pointing in the same direction. They didn't see me as the owner of my life. They saw me as a resource, something useful, something available, something that existed to support everyone else. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Not anymore. Not ever again. Laura listened without interrupting. When I finally stopped speaking, she sighed, a long, slow sigh. Then she asked one question. The question that would change everything. Evelyn, have you ever reviewed the financial records yourself? I frowned. What records? The ones your parents gave you. My stomach tightened. I trusted them. That's not what I asked. Silence. Then she continued. I want you to bring me every document you have. Why? Another pause. Longer this time. Then, Laura spoke very carefully, because lawyers learn how to recognize danger before everyone else. And apparently she had already found something. Something important. Something my family never expected anyone to notice. Evelyn, she said quietly, I think we need to find out where your money actually went. And for the first time that night, I was afraid of the answer. For a long time after the call ended, I sat alone in my office, staring at the folder. The house was silent. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, my entire understanding of the last 7 years was beginning to crack. I didn't want Laura to be right. That was the truth. People assume discovering betrayal is satisfying. It isn't. Not at first. At first you desperately hope you're wrong. You hope there's an explanation. A misunderstanding, a missing piece, anything. Because the alternative means accepting that people you loved looked directly at your sacrifices and decided to take more. And I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Still, the next morning I loaded every document I could find into 3 storage boxes and drove to Laura's office. Laura Bennett worked in a small brick building near downtown Charleston. Nothing flashy. No marble floors, no giant conference rooms, just a practical office filled with practical people, the kind of place where problems got solved. When I arrived, she was already waiting, coffee in one hand, reading glasses balanced on her nose. She looked at the boxes, then at me. Everything? Everything I could find. She nodded. Good. Neither of us spoke much after that, because there wasn't much to say. The documents would speak for themselves. Eventually, 3 days passed, then 5, then 7. On the 8th day, Laura called. The moment I heard her voice, I knew something was wrong. Not because she sounded emotional, because she sounded careful. Lawyers become careful when they're trying to determine how much truth a person can handle at once. Evelyn, how bad is it? Silence. Then, can you come in? My stomach dropped. That answer told me more than words ever could. An hour later, I was sitting across from her desk. 3 folders sat neatly arranged between us. Red, blue, black. Laura rested her hands on top of them. Before we start, she said, I need you to understand something. I nodded. Okay. I don't know whether what happened was intentional. I frowned. What does that mean? It means I know money moved. She tapped the first folder. I know records don't match. Tap. I know information was withheld. Tap. And I know somebody wasn't telling you the whole truth. My chest tightened. I looked at the folders. Suddenly they felt dangerous. Like opening them would permanently divide my life into before and after. Laura opened the red folder first. Let's start with the mortgage issue. The story I had always believed was simple. My parents fell behind on payments. Medical expenses created hardship. I stepped in. Problem solved. Except that wasn't what happened. Not even close. Laura slid several documents toward me. Bank statements, payment histories, property records. The dates immediately caught my attention. I leaned forward. What am I looking at? Laura pointed to a highlighted section. According to these records, your parents weren't 3 months behind. What? They were current. I stared at her, then at the paperwork, then back at her. No, she nodded once. They were current. I blinked, again and again, because my brain refused to process it. That's impossible. Unfortunately, it isn't. My hands started trembling, just slightly. Enough to notice. Laura pushed another document toward me. This payment here. I looked down. The amount was familiar, painfully familiar. It was the exact amount I had transferred to my parents 7 years earlier. Every cent, Laura continued. The money wasn't used to save the house. The room felt smaller. What? It was deposited. She pointed again. Transferred. Another page. Transferred again. Another page. Then she stopped. I followed the trail. One account, then another, until finally the money landed somewhere I recognized. A business account. Daniel's business account. My brother's. For several seconds I couldn't speak. I couldn't even think. All I could do was stare. My father's desperate phone call replayed in my head. His voice. The fear. The urgency. The promise. We might lose the house. The sentence that changed everything. The sentence that emptied my savings. The sentence that apparently wasn't true. I swallowed hard. No. Laura remained silent. I hated that silence, because it meant she had evidence. Evidence doesn't argue. Evidence doesn't comfort. Evidence simply exists. I looked at the documents again. The dates matched. Every single one. The money had never gone where I believed it went. Not once. I laughed. A short sound. Sharp. Humorless. Laura watched carefully. You okay? No. I answered immediately. Because lying seemed pointless now. No, I'm definitely not okay. I looked out the window. The city moved normally. Cars drove past. People walked down sidewalks. Everything looked ordinary. Meanwhile, my entire past was rearranging itself, one document at a time. Why? The word escaped before I realized I was speaking. Why would they do that? Laura didn't answer. Because lawyers deal in facts, not motives. And facts were already bad enough. Then she opened the blue folder. I wish she hadn't. The red folder hurt. The blue folder destroyed whatever remained of my denial. Because it focused on Daniel. Every loan, every transfer, every emergency, every crisis. All organized, all documented, all traceable. Years of financial history reduced to paper. And the pattern was impossible to miss. Whenever Daniel needed money, somehow a family emergency appeared. Whenever his business struggled, someone else suddenly required help. Whenever debt accumulated, a new crisis emerged. Each story was slightly different, but the destination was always the same. Daniel. Always Daniel. I felt sick, physically sick, like my body was rejecting the information. I remembered birthdays I missed because I was working overtime, vacations I canceled, clothes I didn't buy, dreams I postponed. Everything I sacrificed, not for survival, not for emergencies, not for family security. For Daniel. For years, without knowing, Laura finally closed the blue folder. Neither of us spoke. Several minutes passed. Then she reached for the black folder, the last one, the smallest, the one that frightened me most. Because by then I had learned something. The smaller the folder, the bigger the problem. Laura opened it. One page, then another, then a third. At first I didn't understand what I was seeing. Property discussions, emails, messages, notes. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious. Then I noticed the dates. Most were recent, very recent. Within the last year. My stomach dropped again. No. Laura looked at me carefully. You see it? I nodded slowly. The conversations weren't about Daniel's business or my parents' finances. They were about my house. My house. The house I'd spent 7 years rebuilding. There were discussions about future ownership, potential transfers, living arrangements, inheritance considerations, long-term plans, plans involving my property, plans involving my future, plans involving me. Without me. One email stopped me cold. I read it once, then twice, then 3 times, because surely I misunderstood. Surely. But I hadn't. The message came from my mother, sent 8 months earlier, to my father, and copied to Daniel. It contained one sentence. Just one. One sentence that changed everything. One sentence I will never forget. Evelyn has never cared much about money, so eventually she'll do the right thing. I stared at the words. Eventually she'll do the right thing. Not ask, not discuss, not negotiate, not offer, just surrender. Because in their minds, the outcome was already decided. They weren't planning how to approach me. They were planning what would happen after I agreed. Because agreement wasn't considered optional. It was assumed, expected, guaranteed. The room blurred slightly. I realized tears were forming, not from sadness, from humiliation. The deepest pain wasn't losing money. It wasn't even being manipulated. It was discovering how little they respected me, how completely they misunderstood me. They thought generosity meant weakness. Kindness meant compliance. Patience meant permission. They confused love with access. And now, they were about to learn the difference. Laura finally broke the silence. Evelyn. I wiped my eyes. What? She slid one final document across the desk. This arrived yesterday. I looked down. The document carried a familiar name. Daniel Carter. My brother. I began reading. Halfway through the first page, my heartbeat accelerated. By the second page, I was no longer breathing normally. By the third page, I understood exactly why he had suddenly decided I needed to leave my house. And for the first time, everything made sense. Every conversation, every pressure campaign, every family meeting, every strange comment, every assumption. Because Daniel wasn't just asking for my house. He desperately needed it. And if the document in front of me was accurate, he was running out of time, fast. I read the document 4 times. Not because it was complicated, because I couldn't believe it. The answer had been sitting in front of me all along, hidden beneath years of excuses, years of emergencies, years of carefully constructed stories, and somehow I had never seen it. Daniel wasn't struggling. He was drowning. There is a difference. Struggling means you still have options. Drowning means you're already underwater and pretending you can still breathe. According to the records Laura had obtained, my brother's business wasn't experiencing a temporary setback. It had been failing for years, not months, years. The profits he bragged about at family dinners? Mostly fiction. The expensive vacations he posted online? Debt. The new SUV? Debt. The designer furniture? Debt. The luxury nursery he and Madison built for the baby? Debt. Everything was debt. Layers and layers of debt, built on top of more debt, like a house balanced on rotten wood, one strong wind away from collapse. And now the wind had arrived. What happens if he can't pay? I already knew the answer, but I needed to hear it. Laura folded her hands. There are several possibilities. I waited. Best case, he loses the business. I nodded. And worst case? She didn't answer immediately. That frightened me more than any words. Finally she spoke. Bankruptcy. The room fell silent. And if that happens? Laura sighed. Creditors start looking for assets. Assets. The word echoed inside my head. Assets. Property. Homes. Investments. Anything valuable. Anything that could be turned into money. I looked down at the document. Then I looked at Laura. They wanted my house. Yes. The answer came instantly. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Just yes. Because the evidence no longer left room for doubt. For months, maybe longer, my family had been trying to position my house as Daniel's future solution. A place he could move into, a property he could leverage, an asset he could control. The details probably varied depending on circumstances, but the goal never changed. My house, my sacrifice, my future. Used to repair the consequences of his decisions, just like everything else. I leaned back in the chair, suddenly exhausted, not physically, emotionally. There is a specific kind of fatigue that comes from finally understanding a painful truth. A truth you've spent years unknowingly carrying. A truth your mind was protecting you from, until it couldn't anymore. That was how I felt, like someone had removed a blindfold. And now I couldn't stop seeing. Did my parents know? The question escaped before I could stop it. Laura considered carefully. I can't prove intent. I nodded. Lawyer language. Precise. Careful. Accurate. But, she met my eyes. But based on the communications I've reviewed, they were aware of his financial problems. I looked away. Because that hurt more than anything. More than the money. More than the manipulation. More than the lies. My parents knew. Maybe not every detail. Maybe not every number. But enough. Enough to understand what was happening. Enough to choose sides. And they chose his. The strange thing about heartbreak is that it rarely arrives all at once. Movies get that wrong. Real heartbreak arrives in waves. One realization, then another, then another. each one removing a piece of the life you thought you had, until eventually nothing looks the same. I sat there remembering birthdays, Christmas mornings, family dinners, Sunday visits. All the moments I once considered happy. Now I wondered how many conversations happened after I left. How many plans? How many discussions? How many decisions about my future were made without me? The thought made my stomach turn. Laura interrupted my thoughts. What are you going to do? I stared at the desk. Good question. What was I gonna do? 7 years earlier I would have apologized. Explained. Negotiated. Compromised. I would have searched desperately for a solution that made everyone happy. But 7 years earlier I still believed everyone cared whether I was happy. That belief was gone now. The documents had taken it, along with several other illusions. I looked up. What would you do? Laura smiled slightly. Professionally or personally? Both. She leaned back. Professionally? I nodded. I'd protect myself immediately. And personally? The smile disappeared. I'd stop rescuing people determined to sink their own ships. Those words followed me all the way home. Protect yourself immediately. Stop rescuing people. Simple advice. Reasonable advice. Yet somehow it felt revolutionary, because I had spent most of my adult life doing the opposite. Protecting everyone else. Rescuing everyone else. Absorbing consequences meant for everyone else. No wonder I was exhausted. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for several minutes. The house stood exactly as it always had. White siding. Wide front porch. Blue shutters. Flower beds lining the walkway. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had changed, because now I understood why Daniel wanted it. Not because it was convenient. Not because his growing family needed space. Not because he loved the property. Because it represented survival. His survival. At my expense. Again. I walked inside, set my keys on the counter, and noticed something strange. An envelope, tucked beneath the front door. I frowned, picked it up, recognized the handwriting immediately. My mother's. My chest tightened. Slowly I opened it. Inside was a single folded letter. Short. Simple. Direct. The kind of letter written by someone who believes the outcome is already decided. I unfolded it and started reading. Evelyn, we know this situation has been emotional, but families need to make sacrifices for one another. Daniel and Madison are about to welcome a child. Their needs are different now. You have always been independent, strong, capable. We're asking you to think about what's best for everyone. Sometimes being right isn't as important as being kind. We hope you'll make the choice that keeps this family together. Love, Mom and Dad. I read it once, then twice, then a third time. Each reading revealed something new. Not one apology, not one acknowledgement, not one expression of gratitude. Nothing about the years I'd spent helping. Nothing about the sacrifices. Nothing about fairness. Only expectation, wrapped in the language of love. Something inside me finally snapped. Not dramatically, not loudly. Quietly, like a rope breaking after years of tension. I folded the letter, placed it on the table, and laughed. Not because it was funny, because for the first time I saw the manipulation clearly. If I agreed, I was kind. If I refused, I was selfish. The game was designed so only one outcome allowed me to remain the good daughter, the good sister, the good person, and I was done playing. That evening my phone started ringing. First my mother, then my father, then Daniel, then Madison. Again, and again, and again. I ignored every call, every message, every voicemail. For the first time in years, I chose silence, and apparently silence terrified them. By the next afternoon, Daniel was standing on my porch. I saw his truck through the window, saw him walk to the front door, saw him knock, then knock again, then again. I opened the door, but I didn't invite him inside. We stood facing each other, the warm summer air between us. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then Daniel smiled, the same charming smile that had worked his entire life. Can we talk? I crossed my arms. We're talking. The smile faltered slightly. Mom said you haven't been answering. That's true. Evelyn. He sighed. We're family. There it was. Family. Always family. The word appeared whenever they wanted something, never when they were taking something. Only when they needed access. What do you want, Daniel? His expression changed. Just slightly. Enough to reveal frustration beneath the charm. I want us to fix this. Fix what? You know what? I nodded slowly. I think I do. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. Just a flicker. But it was there, and suddenly I realized something important. He didn't know what I knew, not yet. Evelyn. His voice softened. We can work something out. Work something out. Interesting choice of words. Not once did he say the house belonged to me. Not once did he acknowledge my ownership. Only solutions, arrangements, compromises. Because in his mind the destination was already determined. They were merely negotiating the route. I smiled. A calm smile. The kind that makes people nervous. Immediately I saw his shoulders tense. Because for the first time in our entire lives, I wasn't reacting the way he expected. And that scared him, more than anger. More than tears. More than arguments. Because anger can be manipulated. Guilt can be redirected. But calm? Calm means someone has information. And information changes everything. Daniel, I said quietly. His expression tightened. Yeah? I looked directly into his eyes, then asked the one question he never expected me to ask. How much do you owe? The color drained from his face. And in that exact moment, I got my answer. The color drained from Daniel's face. And in that exact moment, I got my answer. Not because he spoke. Because he didn't. People can hide a lot with words. It's much harder to hide the truth when you're shocked. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then he laughed. Too quickly. Too loudly. The kind of laugh people use when panic arrives before a response. I don't know what you're talking about. I nodded. Of course. Evelyn. How much? His jaw tightened. I could practically see him calculating. Trying to determine what I knew. Trying to determine how much danger he was in. Trying to determine whether he could still control the conversation. Finally, he sighed. You've been talking to someone. Yes, Mom and Dad don't know you're doing this. No. Another silence. Then he made a mistake. A huge mistake. He became angry, not guilty, not ashamed. Angry, as though I had violated some unspoken rule by learning the truth. You had no right digging through private business matters. I almost laughed. Private business matters. Interesting, because my money apparently wasn't private. My savings weren't private. My future weren't private. Only his mistakes, those were private. You used me. The words came out calmly. Almost gently. Daniel looked away. That told me everything, because innocent people deny. Guilty people avoid eye contact. You don't understand. There it is. What? The excuse. His expression hardened. You think everything is simple. No. I shook my head. I think I spent years solving problems I didn't create. For a moment, I saw something I had never seen before. Fear. Real fear. Not fear of losing me. Not fear of damaging our relationship. Fear of consequences. Fear that the rescue plan was collapsing. Fear that I was no longer available. And suddenly I understood something important. Daniel never expected resistance. None of them did. Their entire strategy depended on one assumption. That I would eventually surrender. Just like always. You know what your problem is? He asked. I smiled slightly. No, tell me. You keep score. I stared at him. Then laughed. Actually laughed, because after everything I had discovered, that was his defense. Not that the information was wrong, not that the transfers didn't happen, not that the lies weren't real. His complaint was that I remembered, that I kept records. That I noticed. You're right, he frowned. What? I do keep score. The smile disappeared from my face. Because somebody had to. He left 20 minutes later. Angry, frustrated, desperate. And for the first time in years, I felt absolutely nothing. No guilt. No obligation. No responsibility. Just clarity. Pure clarity. The family meeting happened 3 days later. Requested by my parents. Demanded by Daniel. Supported by Madison. Apparently, everyone wanted to move forward. I almost declined. Then Laura gave me excellent advice. Go. Why? Because sometimes people reveal the truth when they think they're still winning. So I went. The meeting took place at my parents' house, the same dining room where we celebrated birthdays, Christmases, graduations, the same room where countless family decisions had been discussed, usually without me. This time was different. This time I came prepared. When I arrived, everyone was already seated. Mom, Dad, Daniel, Madison, 4 faces, 4 different expressions. One shared expectation. They still believed they could convince me. My mother spoke first. Evelyn, thank you for coming. I nodded, nothing more. Her smile looked nervous. Good. It should have. For almost 30 minutes they talked. About family. About love. About sacrifice. About unity. About kindness. Interesting topics. Not one mention of the money. Not one mention of the lies. Not one mention of the documents. Eventually I stopped them. Can we skip to the part where you explain what happened to my savings? Silence. Complete silence. The room froze. My father looked down. Daniel stared at the table. Madison looked confused. Apparently she knew less than everyone else. Interesting. Very interesting. What savings? My mother asked. A terrible decision, because once someone lies when you already know the truth. The conversation is over. I opened my folder, removed the documents, and slid them across the table. Nobody touched them. Nobody needed to. They recognized them immediately. For the next hour, something remarkable happened. The truth slowly emerged, not all at once. Piece by piece, like a wall collapsing brick by brick. My father admitted the mortgage story wasn't entirely accurate, then admitted it wasn't accurate at all. My mother admitted they transferred money to Daniel, then admitted they had done it multiple times. Daniel admitted the business problems were much worse than he claimed, then admitted creditors were already pursuing him, then admitted he had expected to move into my house eventually. Not hoped. Expected. Expected. The word hung in the air. Heavy. Embarrassing. Final. Madison looked like she'd been struck by lightning. She stared at her husband, then my parents, then the documents, then back at Daniel. You told me Evelyn offered. Nobody answered. Because nobody could. The silence told her everything. That was the moment everything truly ended. Not with shouting. Not with drama, with exposure. Because lies require agreement. And suddenly nobody could agree anymore. Eventually my mother started crying. My father apologized. Daniel apologized too. Sort of. The kind of apology that sounds suspiciously like self-defense. The kind that focuses on circumstances instead of choices. I listened. Quietly. Respectfully. Then I answered. I forgive you. The room went still. Everyone looked relieved. For about 3 seconds. Then I continued. But nothing is changing. Relief vanished instantly. My mother blinked. What do you mean? I looked around the table, at all of them, then gave the answer I had spent years earning. The house is mine. Silence. My finances are mine. More silence. My future is mine. Nobody spoke, because there was nothing left to say. I stood, collected my documents, closed the folder, and smiled, not out of victory, out of peace. Real peace, the kind that arrives when you finally stop carrying weight that never belonged to you. 6 months later, Daniel filed for bankruptcy. The business closed. He and Madison moved into a small rental apartment, not my house, their own place, their own responsibility. For the first time in his life, my parents eventually sold their home and downsized. Not because of me, because reality finally arrived, the same reality I had been protecting them from for years. As for me, I kept my house. I planted a garden, finished renovating the guest room, started traveling again, started sleeping better, started laughing more, started living. People often ask whether I regret helping my family. The answer surprises them. No. I don't regret helping. I regret believing help and sacrifice were the same thing. They're not. Help is a gift. Sacrifice becomes a trap when it's expected. And once you learn that difference, your entire life changes. Last week I was sitting on my front porch watching the sunset, the same porch everyone once expected me to give away. The same house everyone assumed would eventually belong to someone else. The phone rang. It was my father. We talked for a while. A normal conversation. No requests. No emergencies. No pressure. Just conversation. When the call ended, I looked across the yard and smiled. Because for the first time in years, I finally had something my family could never take from me. Not my money, not my house, not my future. My boundaries, and those were worth more than everything else combined.